I never imagined that a single moment could shift the trajectory of my entire life. The accident happened without warning, a blur of metal, glass, and screeching tires that left me disoriented and terrified. Pain radiated through my body, but the fear for my wife's well-being consumed me more than anything else. I struggled to make sense of the chaos around me, the sounds of sirens, the flashing lights, the murmurs of concerned strangers. In those first moments, I thought survival itself was a miracle, that the fact we had come through with injuries, though serious, was enough to ground us in gratitude. The days following the accident were filled with recovery, medical checks, and the slow, painstaking return to mobility. Yet amid the physical healing, a deeper, far more unsettling discovery began to emerge. Small inconsistencies in our conversation, subtle hints in her demeanor, and the way she avoided certain topics gradually coalesced into an unbearable realization. My wife had been unfaithful. The trust I had assumed was unshakable fractured in an instant. The betrayal, hidden in plain sight, revealed itself not in dramatic confrontation but in the quiet, undeniable patterns of her behavior. I grappled with conflicting emotions: shock, grief, anger, and disbelief. How could the woman I had loved, shared life with, and trusted implicitly betray me so profoundly? The accident, a moment that should have drawn us closer together in vulnerability and shared humanity, instead became the lens through which I saw the hidden fractures in our marriage. Pain, both physical and emotional, intertwined in ways I could scarcely process. The realization forced me to examine every memory and interaction, searching for signs I had overlooked. Moments that once seemed benign now carried a sharp edge of suspicion. The dinners she claimed to have had at work, the unexplained absences, the secrecy around her phone and messages, they all pointed to a truth I had never wanted to confront. The woman I had trusted implicitly had been living a dual life, concealing an affair behind a facade of normalcy. As the initial shock faded, a deeper reflection took hold. I considered the nature of trust and intimacy, and how easily a relationship built on love and shared experience could be undermined by deception. The betrayal was not just an emotional wound. It was a fundamental disruption to the understanding upon which our partnership was founded. I realized that surviving the accident physically was insignificant compared to surviving the revelation of infidelity emotionally. The accident had preserved my life, but the betrayal threatened the very essence of my existence as I had known it. I contemplated the implications of confronting her, the potential consequences for our marriage, and the long-term impact on both our lives. Yet even in this deliberation, I understood that the affair was a symptom of deeper incompatibilities and spoken resentments, or desires that had festered beneath the surface. The truth, once uncovered, demanded acknowledgement and reckoning, whether I was ready to face it or not. Recovery became not only a physical process but also an emotional journey. I navigated waves of grief and anger, often feeling destabilized by the enormity of the revelation. Trust, once broken, is not easily repaired, and I realized that the accident had not merely revealed my vulnerability to physical harm, but had exposed the fragility of my emotional security. I struggled with sleepless nights, replaying moments in my mind trying to understand what I had missed and why. The sense of betrayal was compounded by the fact that it had been hidden so effectively, leaving me questioning the authenticity of every shared memory and experience. I found myself reevaluating every aspect of our marriage, the moments of joy, the shared accomplishments, the plans we had made for the future. Each memory now carried a dual meaning, overlaid with the knowledge of infidelity. Yet amid the pain, I also recognized the clarity this revelation provided. It forced me to confront the reality of our relationship without the distortions of idealization or denial. I understood that moving forward required an honest assessment of my values, boundaries, and expectations. The experience taught me the importance of self-respect, resilience, and personal integrity. I realized that surviving a physical ordeal was only part of the human experience. Surviving emotional betrayal demanded courage, reflection, and decisive action. I began to prioritize my own well-being, carefully considering whether reconciliation, separation, or other forms of resolution were appropriate. The betrayal, though deeply wounding, became a catalyst for personal growth, self-awareness, and a reassessment of what I would accept in future relationships. I also reflected on the unpredictable nature of life, how moments of catastrophe can reveal hidden truths, and how resilience is tested not only by physical danger but by emotional treachery. The car accident, a seemingly tragic event, had inadvertently exposed a deeper, more insidious danger: the erosion of trust in the one person I had relied upon most. Surviving the accident physically was almost secondary to the survival of my sense of self, my understanding of integrity, and my capacity to navigate betrayal. Over time, I developed a framework for processing the intertwined experiences of trauma and betrayal. I learned to compartmentalize pain, to reflect without becoming paralyzed, and to move forward with deliberate intention. I recognize the necessity of establishing boundaries, protecting emotional well-being, and pursuing clarity in relationships. The lessons of the accident and the betrayal became inseparable. Both revealed the fragility of life and relationships. Both demanded resilience, and both underscored the critical importance of truth, transparency, and accountability. In the months and years that followed, I rebuilt my life with a renewed understanding of personal boundaries, trust, and emotional self-reliance. I engaged in introspection, therapy, and practices that fostered resilience. I learned to observe the behavior of others critically, to seek clarity in all aspects of relationships, and to value honesty above convenience or comfort. The accident and the subsequent revelation had shattered illusions, but it had also forged a sharper, more grounded sense of reality. Looking back, I understood that surviving the crash was only the first part of a larger journey. The more difficult challenge lay in surviving the betrayal, understanding its causes, and reconstructing a life grounded in integrity. The lessons endured, shaping every subsequent relationship, personal decision, and approach to trust. I emerged stronger, more self-aware, and equipped to navigate life with discernment and resilience, having learned that true survival encompasses both body and spirit, physical safety and emotional integrity. In the weeks after the discovery, the routine of daily life became both a comfort and a challenge. Every familiar object in our home, photos, furniture, even the smallest personal items, reminded me of shared moments now tainted by betrayal. I moved through the motions mechanically at first, performing necessary tasks while my mind replayed the revelation over and over. It was a process of both shock and processing, where the mundane became a refuge from the emotional storm that had engulfed me. Sleep came in fragmented bursts, punctuated by intrusive thoughts and relentless questions. I found myself analyzing every detail of the past months, seeking evidence I had previously ignored, trying to make sense of what I had trusted and what had been deliberately hidden. It became clear that trust is fragile, and that the consequences of deception extend far beyond the act itself. They infiltrate memory, reshape perception, and erode the foundation of intimacy. The accident had nearly ended my life physically, but the betrayal threatened the continuity of my emotional and psychological existence. Gradually, I realized that I had to reclaim agency over my own life. I began structuring my days with purpose, reasserting control over decisions that directly affected me, and creating boundaries that had previously been blurred by love and obligation. The betrayal taught me that self-respect is inseparable from integrity, and that protection of one's emotional well-being is not selfish, it is essential. I started documenting my reflections, cataloging emotions, and assessing priorities. This act of introspection became a form of therapy, allowing me to confront grief, anger, and disappointment in a controlled manner. As the months passed, I noticed subtle shifts in my perspective. The initial shock began to give way to clarity, and with clarity came the ability to make informed decisions. I recognized that the relationship, as it had existed, was fundamentally unsustainable. No reconciliation could erase the betrayal, and no promises could restore the trust that had been broken. I acknowledged the reality that moving forward required not only physical separation but also emotional detachment, a conscious release of expectations tied to the past. During this time, I also confronted the role of forgiveness, not for her sake, but for my own healing. I realized that clinging to anger and resentment only prolonged suffering. Whereas processing the betrayal allowed me to reclaim peace, forgiveness did not mean condoning her actions. It meant acknowledging the reality of the past and refusing to allow it to dictate my future. It became a tool of liberation, helping me disentangle my identity and emotional stability from the chaos of her deception. The physical recovery from the accident mirrored my emotional journey in unexpected ways. I discovered that resilience is cultivated not only through endurance of pain but also through reflection, adjustment, and intentionality. Each day of healing reinforced the importance of self-care, vigilance, and the alignment of values with actions. The accident and the betrayal together had exposed vulnerabilities I hadn't known existed, but they had also revealed my capacity to confront adversity with resolve and clarity. Over time, I began to rebuild my life with deliberate purpose. I refocused on my professional aspiration, deepened friendships grounded in trust, and pursued personal growth that had previously been overshadowed by the demands of a troubled relationship. Every choice, from the small daily routines to major life decisions, was informed by the lessons of that period, the necessity of transparency, the importance of self-respect, and the critical value of discernment in evaluating the character and intentions of others. I also reflected on the broader implications of the betrayal. It reshaped my understanding of intimacy, communication, and partnership. I recognized that honesty is not merely a desirable trait, it is foundational. Love, attraction, and companionship are insufficient if trust is compromised. The revelation had been painful, but it was a lesson in the non-negotiable requirements for a sustainable relationship. I internalized the understanding that deception, once revealed, cannot simply be overlooked. It requires a reevaluation of all assumptions and future intentions. Years later, I observed the long-term effects on my own perspective and approach to life. I became a more discerning partner, a more thoughtful friend, and a more careful participant in any shared endeavor. The experience had instilled a vigilance that balanced empathy with caution, allowing me to engage deeply without losing sight of essential boundaries. I had learned that emotional intelligence is inseparable from ethical clarity, and that personal growth often arises from confronting betrayal and adversity head-on. I also came to understand the nuances of human motivation. Her actions, while indefensible, were driven by desires, fears, and decisions that belonged to her. Recognizing this allowed me to separate my emotional response from a need to assign blame excessively. The pain was real, the betrayal undeniable, but the understanding of human complexity tempered my reactions and facilitated measured reflection. I learned that acceptance of reality, no matter how uncomfortable, is essential for moving forward. In time, I rebuilt relationships with family and friends, sharing selectively the lessons I had learned, and cultivating connections that valued honesty above convenience. The experience fostered empathy, resilience, and a capacity for discernment that influenced every aspect of my life. I discovered that while betrayal cannot be undone, it can be transformed into a guide for future decision-making, a lens for evaluating integrity, and a catalyst for personal empowerment. The car accident, initially a near tragedy, became intertwined with the revelation of infidelity in ways that shaped my worldview. Survival, I realized, encompasses more than physical continuity. It requires the preservation of self-respect, the cultivation of clarity, and the conscious choice to refuse compromise on fundamental principles. In this sense, the accident had been a prelude to a deeper awakening, an event that exposed vulnerabilities and compelled me to confront the essence of trust, commitment, and ethical responsibility. Looking back from a distance of years, I understood that the ordeal had left me profoundly changed but also better prepared for life. I carried forward lessons of discernment, resilience, and ethical clarity into subsequent relationships and endeavors. I became more adept at recognizing patterns, assessing compatibility, and demanding transparency. The experience underscored that true intimacy and partnership are only possible when honesty is absolute and values are aligned. The memory of the accident and the betrayal endured not as a source of bitterness, but as a reference point for growth and clarity. I learned to navigate adversity with deliberation, to separate my identity from the actions of others, and to prioritize integrity above convenience. The lessons became embedded in my character, shaping decisions, relationships, and personal priorities. Survival, in the fullest sense, required not only enduring physical danger but also confronting emotional deception and emerging with renewed purpose. Ultimately, I emerged stronger, wiser, and more self-aware. I had confronted mortality, betrayal, and the fragility of trust, and I had rebuilt a life informed by discernment, self-respect, and ethical clarity. The experience, though harrowing, became a cornerstone of my personal development, a reminder that survival is both physical and emotional, and that resilience is forged not merely in enduring trauma, but in transforming its lessons into a life of integrity, insight, and authenticity. After months of emotional processing, I slowly began to reclaim the life that had been disrupted by the accident and the betrayal. The first steps were small but deliberate, reclaiming routines, nurturing friendships, and reestablishing a sense of personal agency. I realized that healing required intentionality. It was not enough to wait for pain to fade. I had to actively cultivate stability, self-respect, and clarity. Each day became a test of resilience, a chance to reinforce boundaries and affirm my own values. I also rediscovered interests and passions that had been neglected. Activities that once seemed trivial took on profound significance. From long walks and creative pursuits to professional projects I had previously deferred, I learned that self-investment is not selfish, it is essential for rebuilding emotional equilibrium. The time alone, away from the shadow of betrayal, allowed me to explore who I was independently of my relationship. I developed a deeper sense of identity, rooted not in attachment to another person but in personal growth, competence, and ethical clarity. As I regained stability, the notion of romantic connection reemerged in my mind. I approached it cautiously, knowing that trust must be earned, not assumed. The lessons of the past guided my choices. Transparency, alignment of values, and honesty became non-negotiable. I no longer tolerated secrecy or deception, recognizing that even minor compromises could escalate into profound breaches of trust. The experience of betrayal had instilled a vigilance that tempered desire with discernment, ensuring that affection was never blind to reality. In the months and years that followed, I encountered new relationships, some brief, others more enduring. Each was approached with the awareness that love must coexist with integrity. I learned to observe behaviors, evaluate consistency, and value authenticity above charm or convenience. The accident and the subsequent betrayal had not hardened me against love, rather, they had refined my capacity to engage in it wisely. I discovered that true intimacy flourishes only when emotional transparency is matched by ethical consistency. At the same time, I dedicated effort to nurturing relationships outside of romance. Friendships, professional networks, and family connections became sources of strength, insight, and accountability. I realized that a strong support system is indispensable when navigating emotional upheaval. These relationships offered perspective, encouragement, and a mirror to my own growth, reinforcing the importance of integrity and discernment in all aspects of life. Reflecting on the trajectory of recovery, I recognized the profound transformation that had occurred. I had emerged from trauma not merely intact but strengthened, with a refined sense of self, sharper judgment, and a deeper understanding of human behavior. The betrayal that had once seemed insurmountable became a reference point for resilience. I understood that life's most painful lessons, though excruciating in the moment, carry the potential to cultivate wisdom, self-awareness, and fortitude. Years later, I found myself in a relationship built on mutual respect, transparency, and aligned values. The contrast with my previous marriage was striking, where deception had once undermined trust. Honesty now reinforced connection, where secrecy had once eroded intimacy. Clarity now strengthened bonds. I discovered that love, when anchored in integrity, becomes a source of profound fulfillment rather than vulnerability. The lessons of the past informed every choice, guiding my actions, expectations, and approach to partnership. I also reflected on the subtle ways the accident had shaped this outcome. Surviving physical danger had heightened my appreciation for the fragility of life and urgency of authentic connection. The betrayal that followed reinforced the necessity of discernment and ethical clarity. Together, these experiences have forged a perspective that valued transparency, courage, and self-respect above comfort, desire, or convenience. They had taught me that resilience is cultivated not merely by enduring adversity but by transforming its lessons into actionable wisdom. With time, the pain of betrayal softened into insight. I no longer dwelled on the deception with anger or bitterness. Instead, I considered it a defining moment in my personal evolution. It had exposed the fragility of trust, the importance of ethical alignment, and the consequences of overlooking subtle warning signs. By confronting the experience honestly, I had developed tools to navigate future challenges, relationships, and life decisions with confidence and clarity. I also recognized that my story was not unique, yet the combination of events, the accident, the discovery, the betrayal had created a singular opportunity for growth. I had learned to separate self-worth from the actions of others, to cultivate resilience in the face of profound disappointment, and to approach future relationships with both empathy and discernment. The journey had taught me that trust is precious, vulnerability is necessary, and integrity is non-negotiable. Ultimately, I emerged from the experience not only healed but transformed. The accident and betrayal, intertwined in ways that initially seemed catastrophic, became the foundation for a life lived with greater awareness, authenticity, and intentionality. I approached each new challenge with clarity, each relationship with careful attention, and each decision with ethical deliberation. Survival, I had learned, is multifaceted. It encompasses physical well-being, emotional integrity, and the courage to act decisively in alignment with one's values. Looking back, I understood that the pain, shock, and betrayal had not been wasted. They had forged resilience, insight, and a refined moral compass. I had rebuilt my life with intention, creating connections grounded in honesty and mutual respect, cultivating self-awareness, and embracing a sense of personal empowerment that had once seemed elusive. The experience, once a source of devastation, became a catalyst for growth, clarity, and authentic fulfillment, shaping every aspect of my life in profound and lasting ways.